One of the biggest blocks to healthy communication is this belief that when someone doesn't do what we want, it means something about us. We assume it means they're disrespecting us, or they're violating our boundaries, or they don't care. And very often, it simply means they don't agree with us. That's it. Disagreement is not the same thing as disrespect, and it's not a boundary violation. When we collapse disagreement into disrespect, everything escalates. We stop listening, we get defensive, we start building a case. And suddenly, we're not trying to understand each other anymore, we're trying to win. Hi, I'm Barb Nangle. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. If you're tired of feeling fragmented and overwhelmed, this podcast is your guide to creating a life of wholeness, authenticity, and healthy boundaries. I'm a woman in recovery who is also a boundaries coach and speaker. I share raw and honest insights from my own journey and the principles of 12-step recovery. Discover how to set boundaries without guilt or shame, overcome people-pleasing tendencies, manage your emotions effectively, cultivate a stronger sense of self, and build healthier relationships. My approach is raw, honest, and sometimes a lot sweary. I'm an avid beachcomber and a formerly closeted fan of the Hallmark Channel, especially Christmas movies. I wear fingerless gloves almost all year round because my hands are always cold, and I love taking pictures of license plates with my initials BN on them. I don't speak for or endorse any particular 12-step program of recovery. Though I'm a huge fan of 12-step recovery and a member of two such fellowships, I cannot speak for them. If you're ready for real talk and practical tools for transformation, keep listening. This is episode 335, The Art of Listening, How to Break Free from Chronic Conflict Loops. When I think about romantic relationships, and especially communication in romantic relationships, one phrase keeps coming to mind for me, the art of listening. And I don't mean listening skills the way we usually talk about them. I don't mean making eye contact or repeating back what someone said or making sure you're using the right tone of voice. Those things are important, of course, but that's not what this is about. I mean the internal assumptions we make before we even open our mouths. Because most people who feel stuck in chronic conflict loops in their relationships aren't bad communicators. They're exhausted communicators. They're having the same arguments over and over about the same things, and they don't understand why nothing ever seems to change. They'll say things like, "We've talked about this 1,000 times," or "I've explained this so many times," or "Why doesn't this ever land?" And what's often happening is that the conversation is actually about what's being said isn't actually about what's being said out loud. It's about the meaning that's being assigned underneath it. One of the biggest blocks to healthy communication is this belief that when someone doesn't do what we want, it means something about us. We assume it means they're disrespecting us, or they're violating our boundaries, or they don't care. And very often, it simply means they don't agree with us. That's it. Disagreement is not the same thing as disrespect, and it's not a boundary violation. This is really important because when we collapse disagreement into disrespect, everything escalates. We stop listening, we get defensive, we start building a case. And suddenly, we're not trying to understand each other anymore. We're trying to win. Speaking of building a case, when I did my relationship inventory in recovery, I realized that what I'd been doing in all of my relationships was constantly building a case against my partners. I was collecting evidence that he didn't love me or respect me or why things wouldn't work out. And as they say, seek and ye shall find. If you're constantly looking for evidence that your partner is bad or wrong, you will find it. Another assumption I see all the time is this one. If someone forgets something, it must mean they weren't listening, or they weren't paying attention, or they don't care enough. I remember doing a workshop once where a woman said, after 40 years, my husband should know this. And I said, well, apparently he doesn't. And I didn't say that to be flippant. I said it because here's the reality. Different people think differently. They retain different things. They attend to different things. And that is normal. Something that lives on your radar all the time may never naturally land on someone else's radar. And that doesn't make either of you wrong. It just means it needs to be put on their radar intentionally and sometimes repeatedly. This is where people often get stuck because they think, if I have to keep saying it, it must mean they don't care. But that is not necessarily true. It may just mean this thing doesn't automatically register for them the way it does for you, or it falls off their radar once attended to. I gave the women in that workshop an example from my own life. My sweetheart pays attention to the gutters outside my condo. He notices when they need to be cleaned. He brings it up. He keeps an eye on it. I literally never look at the gutters, ever. I have no internal tracking system for gutters. I don't know when they need to be cleaned. I don't notice when they're full. And it's not because I don't care about him. And it's not because I don't care about the condo. It's because it's not on my radar. And this is where people get into trouble. We start assigning meaning before we communicate. We decide someone isn't listening or doesn't care instead of recognizing that different brains track different things. Over time, this can create resentment. People start keeping score. They start telling themselves stories about what their partner's behavior means, and those stories harden into certainty. This becomes especially challenging in long-standing relationships because over time, people start having the same argument again and again. And this is where the idea of irreconcilable differences often comes in. One person is always late, the other one is always early. One person is neat, the other one is messy. One person sleeps late, the other one gets up early. And instead of seeing these differences as things to manage, we treat them like character flaws that need to be corrected. We act like our partner is doing something wrong by being different from us, and that they should change and turn it into a version of themselves that looks more like us. But irreconcilable differences are called that for a reason. They're irreconcilable. The issue isn't that they exist. The issue is how you handle them. For example, my sweetheart and I have very different sleep schedules. He has a chronic illness, and it often wakes him up in the middle of the night, and he also takes medication that affects his sleep. So he usually goes to bed earlier than I do, and then he often wakes up in the middle of the night for a couple of hours and then goes back to sleep, which means he gets up later than I do. And we don't make each other wrong for that. He doesn't try to make me go to bed when he does, and I don't try to make him stay up later, and I don't try to make him get up when I get up. We both need our sleep, so we organize our lives around that reality instead of fighting it. That's a big shift for a lot of people because many of us were taught implicitly or explicitly that closeness means sameness. That being a good partner means aligning, matching, agreeing. But healthy relationships are not built on sameness. They're built on negotiation and respect. Someone said to me recently, if my partner cares about me, then the things that are important to me should be important to them. And here's the distinction that really matters. There's a difference between acknowledging that something is important to your partner and making it important to you. For example, motorcycles are important to my sweetheart. He's been paying attention to in motorcycles his entire life. He looks at what's for sale. He watches the market. He checks listings online pretty much daily. I could not possibly care any less. That's okay. I understand that motorcycles matter to him. I respect that they matter to him, but I don't need to make them matter to me, and he doesn't want me to. At the same time, I'm not trying to cancel motorcycles out of his life just because it's not my thing. I'm not trying to say that shouldn't matter to you because it doesn't matter to me. Most of the time, I don't even know when he's looking at these things because it's none of my business. And that's actually a really important part of listening, knowing what's yours to engage with and what's simply yours to allow. This is where listening really lives. Listening doesn't mean agreement. Listening doesn't mean sameness. Listening means making room for difference without turning it into a problem that needs to be solved. If you find yourself stuck in chronic conflict loops, I want you to gently ask yourself a few questions. And I'm going to put these questions in the show notes in case you don't have an opportunity to write them down while you're listening. So, where am I assuming disrespect instead of difference? What meaning am I assigning before I've actually communicated? Am I trying to be understood, or am I trying to change who my partner is? So much of communication in romantic relationships comes down to internal safety. When we feel internally safe, we don't need agreement to feel okay. We don't need our partner to be just like us in order to feel secure. We can tolerate difference without panic. And when we can tolerate difference, we can actually listen, not to defend, not to persuade, not to correct, but to understand. And that's the real art of listening. If you ever learned what to say when setting a boundary, but still found yourself caving 5 minutes later, there's a reason for that. Boundaries don't fail because you said it wrong. They fail because your nervous system doesn't feel safe yet. Most people try to set boundaries from guilt, fear, or over-responsibility. Then they wonder why their boundaries collapse the moment someone pushes back. What I teach is how to build internal safety first, so your no doesn't require justification, explaining, or rehearsing speeches in your head at 2 a.m. That's recovery informed. That's how boundaries actually stick. If you're tired of saying yes when you mean no and then beating yourself up for it, I offer a free 30-minute Say No Without Guilt call. No fixing, no pressure, just clarity about what's getting in your way and what could actually help. You can book it through barbchat.net. That's barbchat.net.